Hey review family, alright you crusty bitches, I took to my community tab to do a video because I'm unoriginal and want people to make content for me, so I just have to answer stuff. By the way, this is all a joke. Anyways, one popular thing that was popularized by Jared Dines is making a YouTuber pick between two bands, two artists that can be completely different or completely similar, and just hearing the person's thoughts about it. So I just want to thank everyone that participated in this. If you'd like me to do another one of these, let me know. I'll be putting the names and the comments on the screen somewhere around here. Hope you guys enjoy. Looking forward to this. This is an idea I've been rolling around in my head for a while, so I just figured now's a good time. Alright, so from longtime viewer Michael Purnell, figured you would participate in this. Thank you so much for the continuous support. So the very first matchup, Morbid Angel versus Obituary. Morbid Angel's original material is better than Obituary's early material, but I think that as a whole canon, Obituary is just better in the long run, and I can listen to Obituary's entire discography, whereas there are many misses in Morbid Angel's canon. So for that reason, I would say Obituary would probably be my pick out of the two. Next up, Between the Buried and Me versus Dream Theater. Now, I hate you for making me choose this because I'm a prog head. I like prog music. I like progressive death metal. I like progressive metal, progressive rock. But this might surprise some people. I probably would say on any given day, if I was put between these two bands and asked to pick, more often than not, I would probably choose Between the Buried and Me over Dream Theater. And it's not because I don't like Dream Theater. I own some of their material in physical copy. Really like their discography. Super solid. Literally one of the biggest, most notorious, and most influential prog bands you're going to find, especially in the metal and rock sphere. So to put Dream Theater down, I don't want to make it seem like I hate them by any means. It's just, as a whole, even though Between the Buried and Me does have some weaker releases, I would say as a whole, I enjoy their material more. Mostly because they just merge a variety of different styles that I do enjoy into one. Alright, so from Chips, we have 4 different choices. We have Immolation versus Incantation. And I'll go ahead and say, I got this matchup twice. Immolation versus Incantation. And I don't know if this is a highly contested debate or anything. Me personally, I would choose Immolation. I love Immolation's discography. I think they have one of the cleanest runs, specifically in the 2000s. Love Immolation a lot. Really like Incantation as well. They definitely have their place, and I understand why they would be compared, because they pretty much play in the same lane. But as a whole, I would say I prefer Immolation. Carcass versus Exhumed. Another pretty easy matchup for me. Carcass would be who I would choose in this matchup. And it's mostly because with building releases, Exhumed's discography has just consistently, seemingly, not necessarily gone downhill, but become so familiar that when Exhumed releases a split, an EP, a full length, I'm just kind of sitting there like, yeah, that's cool. While I do enjoy the way Exhumed just sounds grisly and gruesome, I feel like Carcass just has such a flawless run and such a diverse and dynamic discography under their belt. Their trajectory as a band is very different than practically all of what you would see from their contemporaries, practically single-handedly inventing the entire gore grind genre and slowly but surely moving into a direction where they were more of one of the best mellow death bands out there. And plus, I just think they have the more interesting albums in general, so I picked Carcass. Bathory versus Celtic Frost. Surprised you didn't make me do Bathory versus Venom, because boy, I've gotten some backlash ever since I did that Bathory versus Venom video, and I'm not going to apologize for it. My opinion is my opinion. Why are you watching a critic channel if you don't want someone's opinion? But with that being said, out of the two, I am actually not the biggest Celtic Frost fan, and it's weird because I usually like bands, especially old school bands that sound like them, but as a whole, I prefer Bathory's discography. Love Bathory's self-titled. Bathory's self-titled is actually one of my favorite metal releases, and maybe that's cliche, maybe that's stereotypical, but I just genuinely like Bathory's music a lot more than I would Celtic Frost, and if the two are put up against each other, more often than not, I would choose Bathory over Celtic Frost, although Celtic Frost is really kick-ass, great discography as well, not too many misses in their canon either, but if we're talking the two, I prefer Bathory. Alright, so we have a 4-way, Sodom versus Tankard versus Destruction versus Creator. Is it weird that out of 4 bands, my pick is easy out of this? Okay, so these are all obviously thrash bands. Specifically thrash bands that just have a very heavy throttling and straight pedal to the metal sound. Creator. If we're talking these 4, if I had to rank them, I would say Creator, Sodom, Destruction, Tankard. I'm not a Tankard fan, and I'm not that big of a Destruction fan. Sodom and Creator slap. And if we're putting the 2 side by side, I would say those would be the 2 that I would have the most trouble picking between, but I would still side with Creator over Sodom, even if I do believe that Creator is dabbling in a territory where they feel very familiar nowadays. Moving on to Dashi, another longtime supporter, another really great supporter of the channel. Thanks so much for participating. Kicking it off with Death versus Cannibal Corpse. As much as I love Cannibal Corpse, as much as I love Corpse Grinder as a frontman, as a human being, loved seeing them live. They kick ass live. If you ever get the chance to see them live, definitely do it after this whole what the hell ever is going on in the world blows over, or hopefully gets a cure, whatever's going to happen with that. Death. If you put any death metal band up against Death, I feel like it's gonna lose. Like, even really, really good death metal bands, put Morbid Angel, put Obituary, put Cannibal Corpse, put any host of modern bands up against them, Death is going to prevail. The closest you could get is Possessed, and even talking Possessed, Death beats them out. Chuck, the best death metal frontman. I will come out and say that. The best death metal frontman. One of the most innovative vocalists in the game. The amount of Death influence, the more you listen to their discography and really pick it apart, the more you realize just how much influence they had on so many extreme styles of music, and the widespread recognition that Chuck got in his lifetime and post his lifetime is astronomical, unparalleled in the niche. And not to mention, I just feel like if I have had this much trouble coming out with my Death worst to best list, it's saying something for me having trouble picking between what releases are the worst or best. Metallica versus Megadeth. Okay, Metallica sucks ass now. They have completely went down the shitter, and their long-ass bloated records that don't know how to not overstay their welcome or just use the same formulas over and over and over, and just the same riffs and the same predictable solos with no sort of formulaic switches. I would still take Metallica in their heyday over Megadeth now. Megadeth has some of the most iconic metal records of all time. Obviously, Rust in Peace is one of the undisputed GOATs of heavy metal in general and thrash metal, but Metallica's reign through the 80s and the 90s is insane. Megadeth's discography is also really solid. I have not personally been a massive fan of any of their most recent output of either band, but holy shit, Metallica's run, Kill 'Em All, Ride the Lightning, and Justice for All, Master of Puppets, the Black Album, literally 5 of the most flawless heavy metal records that you're going to find. And I would say while they do have some issues here and there, you can't deny that Metallica wins this for me. Judas Priest versus Iron Maiden, another complete classic matchup. While the Neanderthals were discovering fire, this was the debate. You've heard of chunky versus soft peanut butter, right or left Twix. Judas Priest versus Iron Maiden. I will have to give it to Judas Priest. Come on, man. I love Iron Maiden, like, straight up. I just love their records so much. They're one of those comfort bands you can just put on and bop the hell out of. But Judas Priest discography, specifically how they are just able to continuously hit, no let up. They just keep going, and Rob Halford just never ages. The dude never ages. He sounds as good, if not better. He's honed his technique. But yeah, for me, it's pretty easy, even though I love both bands, Judas Priest. Ghost versus Blue Oyster Cult. This is a bit of an odd matchup, and I am assuming that going into this, it was probably given due to how they both like to dabble in lyrics that deal with philosophy, occultism, conspiracy theories, and just a lot of interesting topics that aren't necessarily done by a whole lot of bands, or at least in Blue Oyster Cult's days when they were really, really big and really, really popular and making some great records. That was when they were at their peak and the highest of their high. On any given day, I would say Ghost would be the band I would be more likely to listen to, just because I think Prequel, even though I still to this day stand by my opinion that I don't like Prequel, it's one of my most disliked reviews, but I still just don't really like Prequel. But Meliora is a fantastic record. I still go back to that regularly. And for the most part, except for some hits, I don't think Blue Oyster Cult's deep cuts hold up nearly as well as Ghosts do, even on their worst. Even though Blue Oyster Cult is undoubtedly a classic. Dark Tranquillity versus In Flames. I'm telling you guys this, you're coming through with these classic matchups that I really enjoy. This, if nothing else, has proven to me that my fan base knows what the hell they're talking about. Dark Tranquillity, any day. Yeah, maybe that was a bit quick, but that's probably one of the easiest ones that are on this entire list for me. I prefer Dark Tranquillity. I have seen In Flames live, and I do like In Flames, but I just feel like they're one of those bands that have just dulled with the years. But Dark Tranquillity is just fire as ever. And as a whole, even though Melodeath isn't really a genre that I listen to too terribly much, I have a good amount of bands that I like from it, and I would rank Dark Tranquillity higher than In Flames on pretty much any day. Alright, Vader Gator has 5, and it's some good ones. So, Interpol versus The Strokes. I would say, controversial. Don't like Interpol. Never liked them. Never had a taste for them. And I wouldn't even go so far as to say that I like the Strokes that much, but I think their brand of just kind of, I don't know even what you would call it, post-punk garage revivalism, even though it seemed a bit tacky because it seemed like there were so many bands in the late 90s and the early 2000s that were reviving punk in this kind of aggressive, garagey, lo-fi type of way. I would say I would prefer the Strokes over them, even though neither of these bands are ones that I would really have on like a favorites list. Obviously, Immolation versus Incantation, already went over that. Immolation. Black Sabbath versus Led Zeppelin. Black Sabbath is a band that it is very easy to get lost in the discography of and start kind of banging your head and being like, they were treading water at certain points, whereas I never felt a moment in Led Zeppelin's discography going through it that they really had any definitive misses. Despite having a theoretically short run and short lifespan, and it's difficult to compare Black Sabbath to that, I would say I prefer personally Led Zeppelin over Black Sabbath, even though Black Sabbath literally influenced one of my favorite metal subgenres, doom metal. I would still pick Led Zeppelin. Soundgarden versus Alice in Chains. I am an Alice in Chains stan. Take that to my grave. While I do really appreciate Soundgarden, rest in peace to Chris Cornell, fantastic frontman, some great tracks under their belt, I would say Alice in Chains is one of my favorite bands, and in my opinion, and I feel like if I ever did a ranking video for the Big Four of grunge, it might get me in some shit, but I prefer them over Nirvana. And since we're on the topic of the Big Four, and I've already mentioned 2 of them, yes, I prefer them over Pearl Jam too, because Pearl Jam sucks now. Sue me. Tomb Mold versus Gatecreeper. Tomb Mold any day. I do not get Gatecreeper. And that's coming from someone that really likes the dingy, murky aesthetic of just heavy, gritty death metal. I was not impressed. I was not impressed at all. And I just feel like it dulled even more their most recent record. I believe I gave it a review, and I wasn't too terribly positive of it. And I've just gotten worse on it. I don't really like Gatecreeper, but Tomb Mold, love them. Planetary Clairvoyance is holding up so well. So yeah, not too hard there. I will pick Tomb Mold. Alright, Lil Psycho has some really neat suggestions, starting with Eminem versus ICP. Now, I'll be honest, I've never been too much of a juggalo. I do like a good amount of Insane Clown Posse tracks, and their most recent record, if that is their most recent record and they've not dropped anything since, because I know they're decently prolific, both members and the band, I would say Eminem any day. Eminem even at his worst. I have not been a fan of Eminem recently. I would say Music to Be Murdered By was a great return to form, and I did give that a very positive review. But other than that, he's just been really iffy recently. He's not really been dropping anything that I've enjoyed. Kamikaze, I was not a fan of. Revival, I was not a fan of, and even Music to Be Murdered By has some significant flaws that were evident, but I would still pick Eminem over ICP. Especially if we're going by how Eminem in the 90s and early 2000s had a very horrorcore aesthetic, super influential for newer artists that are in horrorcore, and ICP's whole namesake is about being very horrorcore-ish. So if we're comparing Eminem's 90s and early 2000s output that had the sheen of horrorcore, I would prefer him. Grateful Dead versus Phish. Not really a big Phish fan. I would say this is a pretty easy take for Grateful Dead. And then Elvis versus the Beatles. This is another one of those classic debates, and a part of me doesn't get why they're compared, other than the fact that they did write lovey songs and slower songs, super influential to rock music. They were huge sensations. But if we're talking comparison, I like the Beatles more for songwriting and what they did. It's pretty hard to just deny how much the Beatles did for modern music and how they shaped so much of what was to come. And I'm not saying Elvis didn't. Obviously he did. But I'm not the first to say or agree with the fact that Elvis pretty much jacked the ideas of other musicians, brought them to popularity, and got all of the credit for it. So I would say the Beatles. Ronnie said it's different from the current suggestion, but Icon for Hire versus Flyleaf, especially the debut albums for them. Call me an emo alt girl, but I like Flyleaf. I still think Flyleaf holds up. It's crazy. It's literally insane how much I like Flyleaf still. But on the other side, I've never been a fan of Icon for Hire. Don't think there's been a single song of theirs that I've liked, so I will still say Flyleaf. And if you aren't bopping all around me still, then who are you? Once again, from Lil Psycho, we got some others. 6 Feet Under versus Anal Cunt. That's not much of a debate because 6 Feet Under is hot garbage. They're a dumpster fire, a stain on the face of death metal, literally consistently one of the worst batting averages of any extreme metal band on the face of the planet, whereas Anal Cunt are just a fun grindcore band. They have a great sound to them, and even though they're not the most original grindcore band, they're still pretty fun, and I have enjoyed some of their material. Cradle of Filth versus Mayhem, another easy one. Mayhem. I'm not a big fan of Danny Filth, and I'm not a fan of Cradle of Filth, and plus Mayhem's just had a great discography and great influence that is awesome to see. And the fact they're still making music's just great, even through all the tumultuous shit that went down in the Norwegian scene. Slipknot versus Gwar, another easy matchup. Slipknot. I do enjoy Slipknot. They have some weak albums, but for the most part, Slipknot any day. Gwar, I never really had much of a taste for them. Korn versus Cold Chamber. Not a fan of Cold Chamber. I know a lot of people think they're kind of like an underrated gem. I know there's like this underbelly of like, please listen to us in the new metal scene. We're an underground gem. Please listen to us. But can you really deny that Korn is just amazing? Yes, Korn had some hits and some misses, but Korn. Billie Eilish versus Melanie Martinez. I respect both of the artists a ton for different reasons, and comparing them is difficult for how Billie is a lot more avant pop and electro pop, mostly due to Phineas's interesting production style that sets him apart from most of the contemporary pop scene. So while I would say with replayability value, lyrical value, as well as just the general concepts that Melanie versus Billie plays with, I would say as a result, I probably would pick Billie solely for the reason that when it comes to production and when it comes to songwriting, her and her brother make such a solid duo. And even though Billie does not nearly do everything, and Phineas basically takes most of the production on his back and carries her to the finish line, she has a vocal style and approach to songwriting and broke so many conventional norms for pop music and what was popular that it really shows that people can experiment, people can be avant-garde and not be pushed away from the mainstream, and not only can break into the mainstream but become a worldwide phenomenon, take home Grammys, take home #1 slots, and be widely accepted as something that you don't hear much in the scene. There are very few artists, if none, that sound like Billie Eilish, but I can guarantee that down the line you're going to see a lot of Billie Eilish copycats popping up. I guarantee it. Melanie's work ethic is something that I appreciate a ton, and she definitely does have a unique voice, good production, but I would say Billie just for the sake of what she's done for the music scene in general alongside her brother. Powerwolf versus Sabaton. Probably will get some backlash. Not a big fan of either of these bands, but if I had to choose, I would say Sabaton. I think their songwriting is just cleaner. Expander versus Code Orange. I love Code Orange. That's so blunt. I gave their newest record such a great review, Underneath. Still love that record. A great record. One of my favorites this entire year. Whereas Expander, if you haven't seen my most recent review, I wasn't super positive on it. And I'm not that big of a fan of what Expander's doing, unfortunately. Genocide versus, I believe, Slaughter X Troyes. I had not heard of the first band, and I did Google them. I would say Genocide just because I don't really know of the other band, but I have heard Genocide and I have heard their music, and while they're not anything too special, I would say I'd pick them just because I'm not too familiar with the other. And then Stupendium versus Dan Bull. You won't find me that much being that into the nerdcore genres, but out of the two, I would say Dan Bull. I just prefer his approach a lot more, even though Stupendium's super original with what he does. I just associate more with Dan Bull. So thank you guys so much for checking out this video. I appreciate it. If you want me to do another, be sure to let me know. I would not mind whatsoever hosting another one of these. Thank you all so much for sending in your matchups. It was a ton of fun. I'll talk to you guys later. Be sure to like this video if you enjoyed it. Subscribe to join the review family today, and smash that notification bell to be notified of my future uploads. You know who it is. My name is Jay Morris, the Review Guy, and I'm signing off saying farewell.